right, welcome to the 1000 Hours Outside podcast. My name is Ginny Urich, founder of 1000 Hours Outside. So unbelievably thrilled. I've already taken a bunch of pictures to have Joel Salatin on the podcast with us today. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you, Jenny. What an honor and delight to be with you. Thank you.
I'm so thrilled that you're here. You have really influenced our family. I am actually recording this podcast from a small little hobby farm that we did not used to live on. We've been here about 2 years. So you have definitely taken our journey and put it on a really beautiful curve with all of your writing and the documentaries you've been in. So let's see. I've got this amazing bio here. Joel Salatin, 64, is that right? Calls himself, it's in the bio, calls himself a Christian, libertarian, environmentalist, capitalist, lunatic farmer. I love that. Others who like him call him, I like that it says others who like him, call him the most famous farmer in the world. I would say that's true. The high priest of the pasture and the most eclectic thinker from Virginia since Thomas Jefferson. And then you have those who those who don't like him. So interesting. Yeah, you definitely you put out some interesting information and people take some sides, don't they?
They sure do.
They do. You've been featured in the New York Times bestseller with Omnivore's Dilemma, award-winning documentary Food Inc. You serve more than 5,000 families with your farm. And then you just have a whole host of books. I've got a stack of them here that I've read.
Oh,
So
wow.
there we go. These are the ones I've read, but I know that there's more. So could you take just a minute and introduce yourself and your family and how you got to become the lunatic farmer?
Sure. So my lunacy is really embedded in my DNA. I have this wonderful family legacy. My dad's dad, my grandfather, was a charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine when it first started in like 1948, 49. A lot of people today don't realize that right there around World War II, it was a watershed moment in our country. It was not clear whether we would go the chemical approach, the industrial chemical approach in farming, or whether we would go a more, a compost-driven biological approach. And so Rodale, of course, was one of the early articulators of a non-chemical approach. And my grandfather endorsed that wholeheartedly. He never had a farm, but he had a very, very large garden, like a quarter acre, that's a big garden,
Mm-hmm.
and backyard chickens and things like that in Indiana. And so my dad got that from him. And then we came here into Virginia in 1961. I was just 4, and so we got onto this worn out, gullied rock pile farm. It was cheap, and Dad started asking people, both government officials and private, consultants, well, how do I make a living on this farm? And all the advice was anti-ecological. It was build silos, plant corn, graze the woods, plow more and whatever. And Dad saw the chemical approach kind of a drug addiction. You can't get ahead of it. And so I grew up that way and have had the distinct privilege in my lifetime of watching this kind of gullied rock pile, the worst farm in the community, the armpit of the community, turn into now this gem that's arguably the most fertile, abundant farm in the area. I'm not saying that bragging. I'm simply humbly acknowledging patterns and principles that work, that we've been able to work with, not against. And the land has responded in a beautiful way. So I got my first chickens when I was 10 years old, and on my bicycle I'd peddled eggs to the neighbors, and we took them to church, and supplied a couple schools, a couple restaurants, and cut my teeth there on kind of a direct marketing approach there in the late 60s or early 70s as a teenager. And then so I knew I wanted to come back to the farm, but how am I going to make a living at it? The farm was basically a glorified homestead for my growing up. Dad was an accountant, mom was a school teacher. off-farm jobs paid for the land, the
Mhm.
story.
Yeah.
But we always had a couple milk cows. We made cottage cheese and butter and buttermilk, and I had my chickens. We had a large garden. We canned. We froze stuff. We basically ate off the land, but it wasn't what you'd call a going concern. And I when I was basically in college and toying with, okay, how do I get back here? I had a flair for writing. I knew that.
Mhm.
I'd enter essay contests and win and that sort of thing. And so this was the early '70s, Nixon, Watergate, and I thought, oh, I know, I'll become a Woodward and Bernstein. I'll find my mole somewhere, write my bestseller, and then I can come back to the farm. And that was kind of my
Mhm.
thought. And as it turned out, in high school I actually worked part time at the local newspaper and answering the phone, writing obituaries, police reports, things like that, and loved it. Just loved everything about
Mm.
the smell of it, the sense of it, the everything. And I'm a true news junkie. And so the newspaper said they liked me, and they said, well, why don't you come back when you get out of college? I said, well, okay. And so I had this job waiting for me. So I went right back to the newspaper after graduation, and I'm still thinking, how do I get back to the farm full time? And so I'm working in town part time, and I'm milking the cow here and thinking, so, oh, I could milk 10 cows and sell the milk to neighbors and make a living on this farm. There was only one problem: milk was illegal, and I've never,
Right.
I, I,
Yeah.
I have forgiven, but I've not forgotten the fact that the government kept me from being able to come back to the farm, for a couple of years, and until we finally, Teresa and I saved up enough. We lived in the attic. We drove a $75 car. If we didn't grow
Mhm.
it, we didn't eat it. We never went out to eat. We didn't have a television. Still don't have a television.
Mhm.
We just devoted ourselves here, and we lived frugally. And in a couple of years, we were able to save enough to that we could actually live on savings for 1 year. I said, all right, I'm out of here. I'm leaving. I walked out of that town job, and of course, everybody thought we were crazy. But I
Mhm.
said, you know what? We've got it. We can live for 1 year, and what I realized was that how employable I was. I wasn't, even though I was college educated, I didn't mind mixing concrete. I didn't mind, digging ditches, washing dishes, um, any of that stuff. And I realized, everybody wants somebody who will show up on time,
Mhm.
do a little more than they're asked, be courteous, dependable. You don't have to be really fantastic to 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 thrive. And,
Mhm.
and so as they say in this world, those golden chains of that weekly salary fell off when I realized, you know what, anybody would love to have me work for them.
Mhm.
And so I jumped off the cliff. We came home full time. And here's what happened, Jenny. What happened was that by being here, we we changed the slippage, what I call the slippage rate. In other words, by being here,
Mhm.
I didn't have to wait to pull the weeds in the green beans on the weekend. I was here for every calf that was born. I was here,
Wow.
and a lot of this kind of farming is time oriented. It's,
Yeah.
if you wait 2 days, it's too late. The frost got it, or
Yeah.
whatever. And
Yeah.
it's a real timely thing. And so suddenly that little $10,000 nest egg that we had suddenly stretched into
Mhm.
2 years. Because
Wow.
we
Because
were
things
able.
they're not slipping through
Yeah,
the cracks.
that's right. They
Yeah.
weren't slipping. And so anyway, uh, it took about the third year till the third year that we realized, I think we're going to make it. I mean,
Mm.
it was pretty nip and tuck. And I
Wow.
did a couple odd jobs. I helped a guy build fence. I helped a guy plant trees. But listen, when you're living on $300 a month, if you can pick up $500 in cash on a little side hustle, that's a
Yeah.
big deal. It
Yeah.
goes a long way. And so,
Wow.
that's how we started, and we started selling to some local customers and different things, and today now, there's about 25 of us that earn our salaries from the farm,
Wow.
and it's a
Isn't that
it's a
neat? Isn't that neat? It's like, could
it's a
you ever imagined? And then how your life
no,
then starts to intersect with other people's, and now, like
right,
you, the most
right.
popular farmer. I mean, you're the farmer that everybody knows about, and to hear your story from the beginning, I think, they say that one of the keys to success is reading biographies, and
Mm,
so when you know someone's story, then look, like they worked really hard to get here, and it wasn't always like this, and you have a lot of business advice in your books, that come from experience, from direct experience.
right, right. And for my I said my dad was a tax preparer and an accountant. He was not never a CPA, but he did tax preparation work, and so a lot of my financial whatever acumen
Hmm.
came firsthand from him. Watching him do the financials and the accounting, and so fortunately he taught my wife Teresa how to do all that, and
Yeah.
so now I don't know where the money is, where it goes, or what it is, but
But she's got
all
it
I know is
down.
that if she says I can spend money, I can spend money. If she says I can't, I can't. So
I
there you
love it.
go.
So Joel, I've got five of your books sitting here. I've read five of
Yeah.
them. I have You Can
Uh-huh.
Farm, The
Right.
Entrepreneur's Guide to Start. Read all of these when we lived in the suburbs. And now when I say we, I mean me because I read them.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
definitely gave the highlights to my husband. I've read Folks This Ain't Normal, The Marvelous Pigness of Pigs, which is actually probably my favorite. This is
Mm-hmm.
the most recent one I've read. Your Successful Farm Business, and Everything I Want to Do is Illegal. These books they stirred something in me. I think sometimes you read books and they're good, and you pass on, and sometimes you read books and they kind of lodge into your soul, and they bring up ideas that you haven't thought about before. And so what I was hoping is we could just hit a couple of those topics that really stuck out to me. And one, kind of like you're talking about, that your grandpa was into organic farming, is sort of this multi-generational component, and really the multi-generational living is actually something that my husband and I had never really talked about or thought of much. But then we read a lot about it in your books, and you say, of all the farming accomplishments, this is in Folks This Ain't Normal, of all the farming accomplishments for which I have received rewards, the one that means the most is not a plaque on the wall. The best one is that we have 4 generations living on this farm, and every day I'm surrounded by youthful enthusiasm, both from children and grandchildren. So I'm sure people would love to hear
Mm-hmm.
about that, because it makes sense. It makes sense to circle through the housing.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense to, I mean, for us, we really struggled when we had our young kids. My we have fantastic grandparents. I always want to make sure I say that. They're loving and very attentive. We have 2 grandparents on both sides. So the kids each have the 4 grandparents, but they're a drive. Or, I needed, when my kids were young, to just like kick them out the door and say, go to grandma's, or go play with your cousin. I mean, the cousins were such, the little bit of time that we spent interacting with cousins, the kids were so engaged, and I could make a meal. Or so anyway, the multi-generational, and especially the housing thing, like you start in a small. So I would love for our listeners to hear about how you guys live on your farm multi-generationally, who's there,
Yeah. Right.
who's
So yeah.
where.
Yeah. So at this point we have. So my mom is still alive, and she'll be 98 next week. Actually, she'll be 98.
Oh,
So
happy birthday
and
to your
she
mom.
still she still lives independently, but she lives right 50 feet from us in her house,
Yeah.
and just outside the yard fence there, and so she's here, and she's now requiring some care. She's starting to
Hmm.
fail, and so
Yeah.
we're popping over there, every couple hours in the day, and we've got her one of those little punch button things. If she falls, she can punch it, and it'll automatically call us.
Yeah.
We uh, we do about half of her meals now.
Mhm.
She either comes over and eats with us if I can get her over here. She's starting to be less ambulatory, but we take a lot of meals over to her as well,
Yeah.
and kind of that's where we are. Um, and then of course Teresa and I, we live in the house that I grew up in. So what happened was, um, mom and dad were here, and then when Teresa and I got married, we had this big old farmhouse, and so we actually converted the second floor in the attic into an apartment for us. We had our own kitchen, our own bathroom, own everything. Only thing we had to do was we had to come through mom and dad's. We actually had way more privacy than mom and dad did.
You're right,
And
right.
mom and dad, bless their hearts. Um, so we lived up there 7 years, and so when mom and dad wanted to come up, they would just come up and they would knock on the wall. We didn't have a door. They would just
Mhm.
knock on the wall, and come on up. So the point is that both families had a great deal of respect and
Mm.
uh, spatial respect, and the main thing is we had separate bathrooms, separate kitchens, separate living quarters.
Mhm.
So we each had we weren't living, the two women, mom and my wife, were not sharing the kitchen. I
Right.
mean, that's where you start getting into some. So you can live close, but you need space. I
Mhm.
think that's the balance here that we're
Yeah.
talking about. And so then when our daughter was born, Rachel, then we moved to two kids. So by that time, my grandmother, so mom's mother, had lived outside the yard fence for 10 years during my teen years and early marriage. So she passed away. So mom and dad just took her house out and put in a different one, bigger one,
Mhm.
in this basically the same spot. And they moved out and gave Teresa and I the big farmhouse because
Yeah.
we had four of us here, and they
Yep.
moved out, and that put them all on one floor. By that time, dad had gotten sick,
Yes,
and
right.
so
Like
having
a ranch.
yeah,
Yeah.
a rent. You're right, a
Mhm.
single floor deal, right?
Yeah.
Because he couldn't go up and downstairs and things like that. So that was the early time. So then our kids, of course, they grew up in the house. Well, then Daniel decided to get married, and so what do we do? So by that time, things had progressed here on the farm. We had our own sawmill, and early on, we
Mhm.
homeschooled. So when Daniel was a teenager, our son, um, we we had friends that were that built houses, that were in construction, and he had a real interest in that. I'm Anybody knows me knows I'm not a carpenter. I'm a functional
I
woodworker.
remember reading about that in your book.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always told Teresa, I said, every guy wants to build his gal a house, but you wouldn't want to live in the house that I'd build you. It'd be like the house that Jack built, right?
Mhm.
And so anyway, so Daniel at 14 would go for a week at a time on these construction projects. The point being that when he was 19, 20, and started courting Sherry, um, uh, he was confident enough he said, yeah, I can build a house. I can build my own house. So we went
Wow.
up in the woods and selected the trees. I cut the trees. I milled all the wood on the sawmill. We pushed them in a hoop house to be a poor boy kiln to help super dry it quicker.
Mhm.
And he and Sherry got married, and he built his own house. Um,
Wow.
and so they live about I don't know 300 yards from us, kind of up on the hill. And how we picked the spot was the farmhouse here is not located in the center of the property, and so we wanted hot electricity. We wanted infrastructure, water, potable water stuff farther into the center of the property. So we called the utility company, said, how far will you guys run free power? They have a distance that they'll run it for free, and then you just got to start
Mhm.
paying for it. And so they gave us the yardage. We went out, we measured it, and that's where we put the house. Was as
Great.
far as we could get it into the center of the property, for future. And now we're using that hot power for irrigation and for other things. So it's
Ah,
it's
so
been a real
smart.
yeah, it's been a real leverage. So we now, and then of course they started having kids. We now have three grandkids, 18, 16, and soon
Awesome.
to be 14. and all three kids have their own projects. So we still have the four generations on the farm
Yeah.
as long as mom lives. That won't
Yeah.
be too long, I'm confident. But
Yeah.
we still have the four generations on the farm.
Yeah. And you talk about sort of this round robin idea of housing, which just makes so much sense. If you have like a homestead and a couple different sizes of homes, when we first started out, you don't need much space. And then you've got your kids and you need a little bit more space. But then, as sort of that cycle of life goes, you want to go back to that smaller space, to have less to take care of.
Yeah,
And,
who wants
you
to?
know,
Right, you don't want to go into your late elder years running up and
mm,
down three flights of steps.
right,
You
right.
you want it
Yeah,
small. I mean, and who wants to clean a great big
right,
rambling house
right.
as you age? So yeah,
Yeah,
we're big believers in trading houses,
yeah,
and so I think that the most important thing here is to realize it's okay to be close as long as you have private space.
yeah, for sure.
Um, but everybody needs a place where you can go scream,
Yeah.
and
But what a
and
neat
so
thing. It was a concept that we hadn't really ever even heard of too much. And so, like I said, that
mhm,
was one that kind of lodged deep into us. We've thought about it quite a bit. You said, our four generations living on the farm is perhaps my single greatest blessing. Surrounded by this emerald farm is God's creative crown, surrounded by the abundance of field in the fields, the gardens, the basement larder, feasting on compost grown pasture raised food, minimally prepared in our home kitchen, communing with family. This is normal. This is connection, foundation, heritage, tradition. So
mm,
it's given us, dreams, like for our particular family. In fact, there's a little home right next door to us that we have our eye on because
uh-huh,
there's a little gate that opens to it. And we thought, well, maybe our parents could live there, and then that would be a good place for us to go next. If
sure,
so, anyway, just a
yeah,
really awesome and thought-provoking concept and really neat. We're planning on coming down there at some point, so we want to come see it. Um,
good, good.
so okay, so something else. So this book is called this one, Folks, This Ain't Normal. So I love how you ended this book, um, because you ended it with what I feel like is not very normal. You ended it by saying you found contentment and satisfaction. And I think that in this day and age is not very normal. I think that most people are not content and satisfied. But anyway, so a couple of the things, a couple of the things that really stuck out to me uh, was this one about traveling. So I read this book before we lived here on this hobby farm. I read it when we lived in a neighborhood still, and you said, I think the reason we have to travel more is because we don't have anything exciting to do at home anymore. But if we're gardening, cooking, and cottage industrying, home can be as exciting as any discretionary destination. We've divorced our own homes as the centerpiece of life, and that disunion manifests itself in running elsewhere looking for satisfaction. That takes a lot of energy. Wow.
Mm,
That really struck a chord with us about
mhm.
home being the centerpiece. So what are some ways that, your home, I mean, it's a little obvious kind of, but, you know, that your home is the centerpiece of your life and that, you know, how are you finding this satisfaction and contentment that it
Yeah,
seems like everyone
no,
else
it's
is chasing?
right. Well, that's a fair question. So I think it's like a lot of these things, you have to be intentional about it. It doesn't just happen by itself. And so a fire pit in the backyard. I mean, that's a wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, children love fire. You can roast marshmallow. You'd be surprised, Jenny, how many youth, people that are 16 years old, who come here and they've never roasted a marshmallow. They've never
Mm,
had a s'more, a fire roasted s'more.
yeah.
And I'm not trying to get everybody hooked on sugar, but I'm the 80-20 rule. 80 good,
Sure.
20 is okay to be a little bit corrupted, and and so a backyard fire pit is a wonderful thing. Um, Activity, growing your own food, a backyard garden, a couple of chickens, a couple of rabbits, you know, um, things, animals, love you unconditionally. I've never had
Mhm.
a chicken unhappy to see me. I've never had a
Aw.
rabbit that said, "You've got big ears," or "Your hair's shaggy," or whatever. Um, and so there's a real uh, whatever relationship with animals
Mhm.
that's profound,
Yeah.
and and also I think uh, production animals where you're actually eating them as part of the whole cycle. I think that is a profound meaningfulness in the cycle of life, the circle of life, and just living authentically.
Mhm.
Um, we live in such a fantasy world now, from fantasy games to to protection from any evil, any bad, anything. And I think that I can tell you for a fact, we've had for years, we've had customers come. We process chickens here close, and and parents are all squeamish about it. But children under 10, they're they're just into it. They don't scream. They don't good. It's like a natural thing.
Mhm.
We actually, as we age, if we're not touched by those kinds of things, we actually we actually grow out of balance, if you will, grow out of balance about life authenticity,
Mhm.
and the idea that you can't have life without death, without harvest,
Yeah.
and harvest takes work. So creating the home, the cottage, the yardscape, and actually putting into it something meaningful besides a badminton court,
Yeah.
and something that is foundational to life.
Yeah.
Um, uh, brings meaning, and I think self-worth.
Mm.
Why am I important? Well, I'm important because that tomato plant needs me. I'm important because those chickens need to be fed
Mhm.
this morning. Those are profound things,
Yeah.
and we live in a time when a lot of children grow up, um, without well, they have self-worth issues. I mean,
Mhm.
juvenile suicide is a huge issue right now, and and about the most self-worth a young person can get now is to be the top points getter on some video game. Well,
Yeah.
think about the difference between knowing that, hey, this tomato soup I'm eating for supper tonight, I grew the tomatoes, I kept them weeded, I watered them, I picked the tomatoes, and I helped can the tomatoes, and I ran the little food
Yeah.
mill,
Yeah.
and the juice come
Yeah.
out, and
Mhm.
I viscerally participated
Yeah.
in life,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
and if you can't make that exciting, you're
Yeah.
you're in a pretty dry spot.
Yeah. I mean, I really get it. So we've been at this. I grew up. My grandmother, her name is Virginia, so I'm actually Virginia, named after her. But my grandmother was born and raised on a farm in West Virginia,
Yeah.
hundreds of acres, a dairy farm. And so then her brother, my great uncle, he stayed there his whole life. He was never able to have children. He married and they never had children. And
Hmm.
he passed just a couple years ago. And so we would go down there. I always feel like farming is in my blood a little. I mean, we loved going down there as kids. And my
Hmm.
parents would always be like, you got to be kind of quiet. They're not used to having kids around. And it would be me and my two brothers. And
Yeah.
but we love the animals and the cats and the dogs. And so we've been on this just kind of a hobby farm for a couple years. I just finished our third summer and I'd never done anything. Like I said, these things really like settled in our soul over the past decade about trying these different things. And anyway, when so you don't really want to leave your farm. People are people are asking, I speak at we also homeschool and I speak at these different homeschool conferences. And
Mhm.
they're like, "Can you come speak in June?" And I'm like, "I don't really want to." I don't want to leave my stuff. I'm like
Right.
watching it grow and it's fascinating and um so I loved that part about the simple pleasures. You even talked about we did the chicks in an incubator for the first time. And you said simple pleasures are better than complex ones. This is in the farm business book. An incubator hatching chickens, my goodness, it doesn't get any better than that. And I've got pictures of our whole family just, right up next to the thing. And, you're fascinated for the whole process. And
Right,
um,
right.
so I love this concept of having your home be the centerpiece of your life, you know, and um, and then it doesn't take as much energy. We can find satisfaction there.
Yeah,
It's
well,
beautiful.
too often in today's frenzied, frantic culture, we've essentially relegated our homes to pit stops
Yeah.
between
Yes.
life's important things. That life actually occurs outside
Mm,
our home, our yard, our well, the legal term is curtilage, outside of our curtilage. That's where life happens, and this is just a way station in between.
yeah.
And what I would suggest is that if we restructure it, instead, our home, our curtilage can become a germination tray, a launch pad for everything that makes life meaningful. And
Yes.
that's a very different way
Yeah.
of viewing it.
It sure is. It's very beautiful and it makes sense. Okay, you were talking earlier about teens and work. And I've got that down as one of my things here. You say all of us crave affirmation, especially affirmation that genuinely recognizes our contribution to society. You say we've relegated our young teens to teenage foolishness. Never in life do people have as much energy as in their teens. Children, in the past were always valued as a treasure and a blessing, that kids are innovative. Um, so, you know, I think that we're coddling kids. And there's this sort of fear of having them do hard work, and yet this is what they're made for. Um, so I don't know. I have a lot of little notes here, but what does hard work do for teens? And I know you talk a lot about how teens should be able to work more, and they're not able to because of different laws and things.
Yeah, well, I think if I could kind of cut to that, it's a great question. Thank you for the theme steering here, Jenny. I think that if I could cut to the chase on that, it is what what do you want for your children? Ask any parent, what do you want for your children? And most of the time it'll be something like, well, we want them to grow up to be productive adults. I mean, we don't want
Yeah.
them to stay children. We want them to launch, to
Hmm.
launch, to pay their bills, you know, have a family, have a career. We don't want to do their laundry and have them stuck in the basement for the rest of their life. We want them to launch. Well, so the obvious question is, so what if you had a checklist? Let's say let's use the analogy of a launch or a takeoff, okay, like an airplane takeoff. And let's say you have a checklist. Here's what has to be here's what has to be done in order for this plane to take off. Pilots have a checklist, right?
Hmm.
Um, well, that checklist includes things like taking responsibility, being able to make decisions, um, um, you know, understanding consequences
Hmm.
of actions.
A work ethic, I would imagine.
Yeah. Work ethic. How to keep a checkbook or keep your money, staying out of debt, or reduce debt at least. Those kinds of things are on that checklist. Well,
Hmm.
how do you develop that if you don't give real life success failure opportunities for
Right.
young people? And
Yeah.
so I think one of the most abusive things we've done to young people in our culture is deprive them of these early childhood, early adolescent, um, um, adult world interactive, real authentic interactive opportunities with the adult world, so that they
Hmm.
do develop that checklist going
Yeah.
into adulthood.
Yes.
And as a result, um, when they used to, when I mean, I talked to a lady, and she said out in her in Washington State when she was a kid in the 1950s. You know, if you wanted to earn some pocket change, you'd sign up on this register and you'd get on a bus that would take you out and you'd pick apples, you know, in the orchards in Washington State. And
Wow.
that's how you got money to go to the cinema or, you know, go to,
Mm-hmm.
get an ice cream cone or whatever. Um, and, you know, today the very thought of that would just make a lot of people bristle with child abuse and labor laws. No, nobody was forcing those kids to do that. Nobody made them get, no, they, our, our, our humanness, our humanness yearns for needfulness. The day, I mean, we're dealing with this mom right now, you know, she's getting very elderly, and the single biggest emotional issue of elderly people is to feel needed. And
Wow.
it's so important in the human spirit to feel
Wow.
needed. And so when children aren't in an environment and aren't immersed in a place where their contribution is needed, then they start life, they start where you're supposed to end. You know, you're supposed to end life. I've done everything I needed to do. Good. You know, I'm ready to check out now, right? But you're not supposed to start there. You start with a world of contribution to be able to offer because the world needs you. And you know, somebody needs to clean the toilet, somebody needs to do the laundry, somebody needs to you know, cook dinner and pay the bills, and so that needfulness is a is perhaps the foundation
Yeah.
of that checklist, you know, going into adulthood.
Yeah, interesting. Yes, for sure. And that kids aren't getting that at all. You say, now this is what's so interesting to me, Joel, about your books. So this one is called You Can Farm, right? The Entrepreneur's Guide to Start and Succeed in a Farming Enterprise. So here's a little snippet out of here. It says, if our farms, I love that there's so many topics in your book. If our farms do not provide opportunities for children, they will occupy their time sitting in front of the TV, playing Little League, going to the mall, and becoming video game junkies. Then, when they turn 13 and can really be helpful, we've lost them to all these other interests, and farm is not on their list of fun things to do. This is a great tragedy and one of the most significant losses on the average American farm. But you talk about that your children go with you on every job, and then it becomes fun for them, and it meets a need of theirs, and they feel that they're contributing.
Yeah,
Um,
you know, my favorite story about that is our own son Daniel. Well, both our daughter too. Our daughter was an early reader. She's a little takes after me in my writing, my communication ability, and she and three little girlfriends when they were about 8 started a little newsletter called the Ladybug Club and the Ladybug newsletter. Of course, you know, the three parents were their subscribers, and
cute.
I was so taken when she was about 8 or 9, and they were coming up on Labor Day, and you know, what are we going to say about Labor Day, and Rachel wrote this thing about or no, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. It was for Thanksgiving. What are you thankful for? And Rachel's piece was, I'm thankful for work. What a chaotic world it would
Oh,
be if we didn't work.
wow.
And you know, she was like 9, right?
Wow.
And
Yes.
so here's my
So
story on
wise.
Daniel. My story on Daniel. So you know, Daniel would go with me, and I had a early on. I was building some fence. We didn't have a post driver at the time, so I was hand digging the holes, and I would discipline myself or incentivize myself and say, well, I'm not going to take a drink of water until, you know, I get that next post hole done. That kind of thing. You hurry, and you know, it kind of self motivation. And and so Daniel, you know, he's in diapers, you know, on the ground, and he's just starting to talk and toddle around, and of course, you know how they get to whining, you know, I'm
Yeah.
daddy, I'm thirsty, blah blah blah. I say, no, Daniel, we're not going to take a drink until I finish this other post hole, you know, and so he grew up that way. All right, so fast forward. A family moves in down the road a little bit with a son about Daniel's age, and they hit about 10 years old. Well, what do 10-year-old boys want to do on a farm? They want to build a fort, right? Every
Yes,
boy's got to
yes,
build a
for
fort,
sure.
right? Yeah. So the two moms, you know, get a play date settled, and the two boys get together. They're going to build it down at his place. So Teresa takes Daniel over there, to their place, and about an hour to build the fort. And about an hour later, the phone rings, and it's the other boy's mother, and she says, "What is it with your son? He won't let mine have a drink of water until they finish the first wall."
Well, that's funny. Oh, it's
So
stuck in
truly,
there,
two
huh?
people. Yeah, more is caught than taught. More is
That's
caught than
the
taught.
truth. Oh my goodness. Oh, okay. All right. Well, speaking of things being caught then taught, I really want to talk about this. And I know that our audience is eclectic in terms of religious belief. And so sometimes, people have preferences on what they hear and don't hear. But, um, also our life involves what our beliefs are. So, um, I grew up going to church and have always loved the Word of God. And I remember as a kid, hearing these verses from Deuteronomy 6 about teaching teaching your kids diligently, right? Teach and impress them diligently. Talk of these things, when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise up and just talking about God's principles. And I remember as a kid reading those verses and thinking that they were kind of weird, thinking, well, that would be really contrived. How could you talk about God's principles, all the time? And then,
Uh-huh.
we moved to this hobby farm, and so this has really been my journey within the past couple years, and I grew morning glories. So this was for the first time, and I remember the first time that I went out and I saw them, and they'd opened up in the morning, and I'd actually never seen that before, and I thought, oh, this reminds me of the verse that when you lay your requests in the morning and you wait in expectation, and we had an experience where one of our chickens hatched her chicks. And we were not wanting her to do that because we had enough chickens, but she had found a little grassy area, and we came out one morning. It was during the pandemic, so it was actually like a huge highlight for us because we were all bored and kind of stuck. And we came out one morning, and out she comes out of these bushes, and she's got all these little chicks. And so of course we're so excited, and we run over there, and she sits down, and they go under her
Yeah,
wings, and you
like
can't even see that they're there. And I thought,
yeah,
oh, well, there's verses about this, that he
yeah,
will
yeah.
hide you, and you're hidden
Uh,
under and so I loved the marvelous pigness of pigs. That's like I said, I really, really, truly enjoyed and gotten so much out of all your books. But this one sort of hit me at the right time, in terms of it being a mother. And so, like I said, I know that not all of our audience is, of the same faith. But one of the things that you say here is you talk about what kids learn from being outside and being in the garden. And you say, look, I've got my whole pages of notes, and I really want to read the actual quote if I can find it. I did. You say, integrating our lives with plants and animals bathes us in object lessons about responsibility, relationship, faithfulness, expectation, perseverance, diligence, and unconditional love. So no matter, I think, your background in terms of um, people's religious beliefs, or if they're Bible readers or not, I think this concept of that nature
mm,
gives us
mm.
lessons, and
Yes.
and and huge lessons, and even just growth. I think growth, you see growth, like John Holt talked about that, right? Like, you don't have to measure everything. You don't have to measure everything to know that it's growing. You can see growth. And so what are some of the, this is a list, Joel, like responsibility. Who doesn't want this for their kids? Responsibility, relationship, faithfulness, expectation, perseverance, diligence, and unconditional love. um, what are some lessons that nature can teach us, if we take a step back?
Yeah, well, yeah, the premise of that whole book is that that nature is an object lesson of spiritual truth.
Yeah,
You could actually take spiritual out of it if you wanted to, and
yeah.
just say it's an object lesson of truth. And
Mhm.
and so and so um, when you interact with plants and animals, uh, there are some real significant rules that you learn, and I think one of the biggest ones is that this is not a fantasy world.
Yeah.
It's not virtual. On the video screen, if you are, for example, racing a car, and the car, you go too fast and you wreck, in about 2 seconds, it gives you a new car and you continue your race, right?
Hmm.
Or you start over, whatever the game is. You get one of these violent ones, and you kill somebody, and they keep coming back in different forms and different things. Well, none of this is the way life is, Jenny. None of it is the way life is.
Hmm.
In life, in life, if you don't water the tomato plant and it dies, you don't go out and just wait, and the garden gives you a new tomato plant.
Right.
If you don't feed the chickens and they stop laying eggs, um, you've got to feed the chickens. You can't just
Right.
wait and say, well, what's wrong with you? You can't
Right. And that
blame the
there
chickens
are
for not
natural,
for not
I
raising eggs.
right, there are
Yes.
natural laws. And I think what
Yeah.
that book really made me think is that we've gotten our kids away from all of those. It's like with
Right.
1000 hours outside, is like kids are on the screens all the time. So they're not experiencing you reap what you sow. If you put in this bean seed, you're not going to get a cucumber. And there's all of these natural laws that I think we've become as a society, especially our children, are so far removed from. Um, and so I love the book, and it's because
Yeah.
it's an encouragement to say, look, nature has a lot to offer us, um, both as parents and as kids, of things to learn about how the world works.
Yes, you're exactly right. And the world, uh, to use these natural templates, these natural patterns, to understand life principles. Goodness, when you see the chickens picking on each other, they're bullies. Okay. We humans, look, I have never seen pigs. I've never seen a big pig uh, stand over in a corner and say, I think that little pig over there, he's struggling a little bit. I think when they bring the feed to them, I'm going to sit in this corner and wait for that little bit. But but
Well,
see, we humans can be the big pig that steps aside and lets the little pig do it.
yeah,
Pigs don't care. Pigs don't do anything. And so those, you could kind of say all the lessons I need in life I learned in a barnyard, but
yeah,
there's a lot of truth in that. That how to frighten things. You come on too strong, and you scatter the chickens. When you go into, if you want the chickens to come and be friendly, you're gentle with them. You don't go, throwing things around and raising your voice and all that.
mm,
You are gentle. And so these are all things. These are all principles of life living that are visceral. They're not a focus group. They're not an
yeah,
instruction booklet. Um, they're not even in a Sunday school class. They're actually learned. I think my favorite little snippet in that book, Jenny, is to youth leaders that want to take their kids to Six Flags Over Georgia, or
right,
the resort. And I say, why don't you instead get everybody a mattock and have them go cut thistles and multiflora rose at some farmer's field, and
yeah,
then learn. Here's how you attack.
yeah.
Here's how you attack bad things. Here's how you deal with it. You gotta cut. You gotta
You
size it
got to
up
be on top of it,
and
right?
be
Yeah,
yes, your angle of attack,
yeah,
and then when you actually get it, man, that's a very satisfying feeling. You don't have to be
yeah,
a victim to that bramble. You can
yes,
you can whack it out. And those kinds of real life visceral natural experiences, um, they get in our memory because we have smelled them, seen them. Maybe we got a splinter from one, and that's so much more
yes,
whatever
yes,
life meaningful and
yes.
powerful than just talking about it as a
Mhm.
focus group in a session.
Yes, and God has handed those to us, and that sort of has. your book has opened my eyes to look for them. So, we grab, and some people are really against it, but if you talk about things that are controversial, here's one. If you raise monarchs. So this is a controversial one. Um, but anyway, so we grab a few every year, and we have milkweed growing around, and we bring them inside, and when they hatch, everyone
Mm,
everyone's jaw is to the floor, from the 2-year-old to the grandparent. And the
mhm,
verse that says you are a new creation, so to have of these object lessons of spiritual truth are so
mhm.
powerful, that are right there. The chicken, the same thing. The old is gone. Here is this chick. It takes 21 days, right? you know so
Right,
um
right.
so I loved that book. And you know religious beliefs or not, like you said, truth is portrayed all around us in nature. And so that's
Mhm.
something that I think families can use, um, to help teach their kids and to help teach themselves. The sprout needs a lot more care. But then, once those things grow, then, you step back and you get to see the beauty. And I think with parenting, those little ones, they take a whole lot of work all the time,
Right,
and then it gets a
right.
little bit easier, and you really experience the beauty and the
Mhm.
personality and the individuality. So I just really, really enjoyed that book. We're running out of time. But I'm hopping on one more. I've got one more topic. I really had a lot more, but here I'm going to grab one more. The last one is business, because you have some really, really awesome things in all these books about business. And I like to talk to parents about that, because we are modeling for our kids. Um, and we can, if it's not a full time thing, we can do new endeavors and show our kids how to be brave. So you say, let's see, I've got so many here. The opposite of success is not failure, it's quitting. That's a
Mm,
statement. You talk a
yeah,
lot about longevity.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and
yeah. Perseverance. Jenny, a lot of people, they ask me, well, well, you're so clever. You're so, you guys have done so well, blah, blah, blah. I say, no, not actually, no. We were just too stubborn to quit.
there you
And
go.
a lot of
Yes.
times it is just about you just too
Yes.
stubborn to quit. It's
Yeah,
good.
you say, if anything is worth doing, it's worth doing poorly first. Whoever does anything right, this all is my life. Whoever does anything right the first time. Um, and so we're afraid to make a fool of ourselves or have a flop. You even relate it to little babies that kind of plop back down, but as adults, we become scared of plopping back down. We're paralyzed by fear.
Mhm.
So you guys are like a living success of a living model of perseverance, of pushing through. And then, like you talked about earlier, you have 25 employees, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, and and we never made a business plan. We didn't aspire to it. We don't even have sales targets. We're just completely counterintuitive on everything, and we
Yeah.
just feel like if we devote ourselves every day to faithfulness,
Yeah.
then that's gonna accumulate down the pathway. And there are ways to be successful without sales figures. You can be successful in other ways as well, and you can do different kinds of enterprises, different kinds of things. And so yeah, too often I think we make plans too far ahead,
Yeah.
um, and we fail to just think about, well, what should I do tomorrow? There's a book out, the One Thing, and what he
Hmm.
says is that this idea of having multiple objectives and goals, blah blah blah. He said, no. Well, what you really need to do is think about what's the one thing, what one thing could I do today that that would change things for the better. And you just take that one at a time, one step at a time, and you do those one things. And if you do those, the if you identify the most critical thing every day in 10 years, they will accumulate to be the right trajectory,
Hmm.
wherever you happen to be in 10 years from now.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
so
That sounds like a good book. I wrote it down.
yeah,
Joel,
it's a great book.
you have influenced us in so many capacities. What a neat thing. You're not like, it's not just like one piece. It's just like this permeation. And so, like I said, I've got these five of your books. I know a new one just came out.
Yes.
So can you tell the listeners if they want to find out more about you and Polyface Farm, um, in your books, and where can they go? I know people can come visit. It's on our bucket list. We're planning on
Yeah,
coming down
sure,
there.
sure. Well, anybody's welcome to come and visit anytime from anywhere, and see anything unannounced. That's our
So
24/7,
cool.
365 commitment to transparency, which, by the way, does tend to keep you on your toes.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, we have a website, Polyface Farms. If you just type in about POLY, it'll probably jump up to you.
Yeah.
And that has where I'm speaking, where I'm going. It has, of course, all about the farm. It has we have a gift shop with everything from swag to my books to whatever. The latest book is Polyface Micro. It just came out
Mm-hmm.
in whatever
Really
August,
recently, right? I saw
September.
you were doing
Yeah,
signings.
yeah,
Yep.
September, and it'll be released to Amazon January 1st. But
Okay.
right now it's available through our gift shop, and we try to what we call cream the market. Once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so the subtitle is Success with Livestock on a Homestead Scale. So Jenny, all my writing, all my books have been a result of of feedback that I get from people that what do I think what do I think people need right now?
Yeah.
It's that thing. What's the hot button? What's the thing? And as you know, right now, with the world as unsettled as it is, there is
Yeah.
a tsunami of interest in rural self-reliance, in
Yeah.
resiliency, in getting geographically proximate to people who know how to grow things, build things, and fix things. And if you surround yourself with people who know how to grow things, build things, and fix things, you will be you can't be an island, but you can come as about as close as you can be realistic during unsettled times.
Yeah.
and
And
uh, and
self-sufficiency.
yeah, and these are unsettled times.
Yes.
But we can either be angry about it, or we can be proactive and start building those relationships and those masteries of an
Yep.
eclectic group of skills that will allow us and our significant friends to be able to be more resilient in
Yeah.
a unsettled time.
And like you said, those are the things that lead to satisfaction and contentment.
Yes,
Do you
yes.
have 30 seconds? We always end with a favorite outdoor childhood memory of yours.
My favorite outdoor childhood memory. Sometimes these childhood memories, you don't realize how significant they are until way later in life.
Hmm.
And so my most significant one now is is when I was probably 6, 7, or 8 years old. In that period of time, my grandfather, I mentioned my grandfather at the beginning of the program. He had this large garden, and he surrounded that garden with a tea trellis grape arbor with Concord grapes. Well, here on a farm, we could never leave here until late in the summer because we had to make hay. Mom was a school teacher, and of course Dad was a tax preparer, so nothing until April 15th. Anyway, so we never were able to go visit my grandparents until late summer. Well, it was always when the grapes were ripe, and as a little child, I would walk out under those grape arbors. I mean, to me, they seemed like they stretched forever, but they were probably only 100 feet by 100 feet. It was
Hmm.
a bunch, but I was just barely tall enough, to I could reach the bottom ones hanging down. Of course, there were all those yellow bees in there, that were buzzing out.
Okay.
But but what I remember is just being able to walk out there and be nestled in abundance. It was like a womb embrace of abundance, and that has
Wow.
framed my vision, my dream for here is I want to step out the back door every morning and be immersed in this womb of abundance that a benevolent creator has bestowed on me, and has even given me the privilege of being his hands and feet to massage it, caress it, and nurture it in his place as a surrogate caretaker, and that is a profound um, responsibility and opportunity to to bring to our place.
Joel, that's beautiful. And how awesome that it was birthed in you as a child. To
Yeah.
have those experiences that just still stick with you decades later. I cannot tell you how thrilled I am that I got to sit across the screen from you. I know that you are very busy and very sought after, so I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your time. Thank you for everything you shared with us.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be with you. Yeah.